A very good morning, and thank God it's Friday to start with. This is Saddle Crown Court, and just to start, of course, the ongoing trial of former Minister of Petroleum, Diezani, Alison Madueke, and two others. It's nearing the end. Let me start by saying, number one, it's very unlikely that a judge will send jurors out on a Friday. That is very, very unlikely. So we're not living here today. The jurors will definitely be sent out today. Yesterday, the Zionist barrister Jonathan Laidlaw closed his submission. It closed before lunchtime. The defense for Bishop Doye Agama started. It took less than 2 hours because he said, he presented his own case to say, look, there is not one jot of evidence in the crown dragging the bishop into this trial. That's that. I'm going to touch on that later. Number three, the defense for Olatimbo Anyinde started yesterday. He didn't finish. He said he's going to spend over an hour this morning to finish it. So just to give you how things might pan out before I come to how the submissions of Diezani's lawyer yesterday. If the defense for Anyinde closes his case this morning, definitely his submission, he had to explain to the judge that, he needs at least 1 more hour this morning to close his submission. And if he does that before lunch, today also, before I go into that, today also, instead of 9:30 resumption and finishing at 1:30, the judge has said, today we are going all the way. So the judge told the jurors yesterday, don't come at 9:30, come at 10:15, because today we are going all the way to 4:30, to 4 o'clock. I think the judge wants to make sure, my thinking is that the judge definitely wants to do a summing up today, give the jurors weekend to go and rest. And if she finishes a summing up today, Monday, probably finish it on Monday or probably Monday, and I reckon that by Tuesday morning, if not on Monday, jurors will be out. That is just logic. That is just my assessment of how things will be, because when Olatimbo Anyinde's lawyer finishes this morning, hopefully by 11 or thereabout, or just before lunch, the judge will start doing the summing up to tie everything together. So, and hopefully, if she finishes, remember there are 3 defendants, to be summed up, and you have to put the finishing touches on it and give final instructions to the juror. So I'm thinking she probably won't finish the summing up today and then wrap it up on Monday. And it's more logical for a judge to send jurors out on Monday than over the weekend, because so that's just my thinking. But I'll give you update later in the day to see how it pans out. So yesterday, the prosecution was taken to the cleaners again. I'm going to come to the 9 incontrovertible facts which Diezani's lawyer used in closing his case yesterday. Remember yesterday morning I said the judge, or the Jonathan Laidlaw King's Counsel case, he said he was going to finish yesterday by presenting 9 incontrovertible facts to the jurors to help them in arriving at their decisions. Those 9 incontrovertible facts, I'm going to come to that later. But just to touch on what Bishop's defense said yesterday, the defense for Archbishop Doye Agama, remember Archbishop Doye Agama is brother to Diezani. He said, look, it took less than 2 hours. I said, look, they just dragged this man into this case. There is no, he first went to the conspiracy theory, which is part of the count that they level against him with his sister, to say, look, conspiracy. He quoted conspiracy, and I'll just explain that briefly and then still come back to it. I said, look, conspiracy, this was an archbishop who, because Benedict Peters donated $1 million to his charity, to Apostolic Pastors Congress, there is no evidence that there was a conspiracy, and that donation was to influence his sister in the awarding of oil contract. As a matter of fact, when they displayed the bank statement of Benedict Peters, not only was that donation, he said when there's a conspiracy or there was something to hide, he wouldn't be doing this through bank. He said the fact that Benedict Peters and the bishop got the name of Benedict Peters wrong, his first name wrong 2 times, is no reason to think it was Diezani that introduced the 2 of them. And he did mention and said, look, sometimes we forgot people's first name, even after they've been introduced to, despite knowing them. They said, the fact that somebody forgets your first name is no reason why they should be in a bribery trial. That's number 1. Then he also said, when they displayed Bishop's bank statement yesterday, the name of a former prime minister of this country was there, his foundation among the people he donated, that he donates to. Benedict Peters is a philanthropist, according to what we had in court during this trial that started in January. So he said, look, though they didn't touch on that, but he said the fact that Benedict Peters donated there is to Bishop's ministry, there is not one iota of evidence to say there was a discussion for him to influence how contract will be awarded when Diezani was oil minister. And he said, look, and when they showed those statements, those bank statements, which the defense asked that they put up for us to see, there was names of other organizations. Like I said, Tony Blair Foundation, I saw it there among people because he said Benedict Peters is a philanthropist. So he donates to people, he donates to organizations. There are names of churches in Nigeria that he also donated to. And Tony Blair Foundation also, I saw three transfers to Tony Blair Foundation when they displayed his bank statement to say, if there's a conspiracy or anything to bribe, he would, number 1, Bishop will not have been contacting a bank. Standard Chartered, which the money was transferred to the name, to the ministry of a bishop. He said, if somebody wants to be, hiding something, they wouldn't be going through bank. They wouldn't be asking for an accountant. They wouldn't be asking for solicitor. I said, these payments, they were made to banks. They were discussing that if people want to conspire or hide something, they wouldn't be letting other people know that when you're hiding, you don't want many people to be in the know. He said, so the bishop was introduced to a bank, Standard Chartered Bank, which the 1 million was donated to, was transferred to, and also the bishop asked the man who was asking him, the prosecution witness, Reverend Eric Scotland, he was here when the Crown had the floor, and he said, look, this Eric Scotland, who is your prosecution witness, he prepared the account, the audited account of Apostolic Way of Life Ministries for at least 3 years. And I said, this money that was donated to the bishop's ministry, you could see from the account that conferences, citing the evidence of the prosecution witness himself, the prosecution witness that was brought to testify in the case against Bishop Agama was Eric Scotland, Reverend Eric Scotland. He has since left the ministry. He was a volunteer. He said, look, the fact that this man prepared the audited statement, yearly statement of that ministry, and the fact that somebody donated 1 million, there is not one jota, one evidence to say it was to influence his sister. So he said, look, it took less than 2 hours for the defense, for the bishop to wrap up his case. He said, look, this is just. He said, look, he described the Crown, probably said they're just speculating. They didn't even try enough that there was no reason, and also he cited the written direction of the judge to say good character. He said, this is a man who was ordained a bishop in this country, Sodom Cathedral. I said, for him to then destroy all his good works, that it just does not make sense. But beyond that, I said, there is not one single evidence to show that Diezani and her brother discussed that Benedict Peter should donate money and that Diezani was going to influence. So that was that for Benedict Peters. I'm going to go back later, probably in the afternoon, to mention that. But also for Olatimbo Anyede, our lawyer, our defense, remember our own defense is still ongoing. She's going to finish his closing this morning. He also said, number one, he said, look, Olatimbo Anyede is a successful entrepreneur with over 5 companies to her name. I said, and he also attacked the evidence of the prosecution. He said, you said that one of our companies was set up to be doing shopping for Diezani. He then said, look, this Black Light Energy, this Duchess, this Mayfair that you said was set up to be doing shopping for Diezani so as to bribe. I said, this company is still in operation. I said, look, the Crown, if you said this company was set up to, I mentioned a particular name, but you say the company you are saying was set up specifically to be doing shopping for Diezani, the company is still in business 6 years after the indictment period. So you said it just doesn't make sense. So that one also destroyed, attacked the evidence, what the Crown brought. And also in terms of Prince Momo, he said, look, Prince Momo, you said shopping, because shopping, this case is largely built on shopping. Shopping, those arrows. He said, look, Prince Momo was using his cards and also the cards of mainly personal sterling account card of Olatimbo when he needed to spend over £10,000. He said, number one, so that has nothing to do with his business. He said only once or twice, a couple of occasions, that he used the business account of Olatimbo. He said, Prince Momo, so you cannot say because of those shoppings. And he also said the expenditure that you saw, Prince Momo has about 5 cards or more than 5 cards that he used to do his own shopping. So they pointed that out as well. Now to go to Diezani. So our lawyer presented 9 incontrovertible facts. Let me just read from my notes to say what the lawyer said. Okay. So he told the jury, said the advantage to a jury is that these 9 uncontestable facts, either individually or in combinations, they cannot be contended. They cannot be, you cannot argue against them. In other words, the 9 incontrovertible facts he was going to present to the jury to let them know that this case against his client, these facts, either in isolation or in combination, they are strong enough. They are not something which you can deny. So let me even read his exact statement. These 9 points point unequivocally to acquittal on all counts. So that's what the judge said. That is what the defense said, that these 9 incontrovertible facts, they point to an acquittal of his client, that is to Diezani's case. He said, because he said the judge has said you follow the evidence, not just what you read. Of course, they are not allowed to read online, but he said you follow the evidence, and that these 9 facts, they are enough to let the jury know that his client is not guilty. Now, let me read the facts to you. Some of the facts. He said, number one, a long-standing career in interior decoration. Remember again, at the beginning of this, of leading Diezani in evidence, I mentioned to you that the defense started by digging a family history, even a career history, how she came to become an architect, that she said she loved art. And her parents then didn't want, how can you go to university to study art, that, her grandparents spoke to her. So she said, okay, all right, if I'm not going to study art, she loves structure. So that made her to go into architecture. So she said, Jonathan Lidlow said, Diezani has a long history, a long career in interior decoration, and he also pointed to the crown's weaknesses in Vincenzo Caffarella, that when they asked her, when Diezani came with Kola Luku and Co, what was she like? And they said sometimes, she had a good taste, she knew what she was doing. So he said, look, my client has a long design, a long career in interior design. And so to say she was advising those people, you just cannot deny it, because she is an architect by career. And also during the trial, they showed us some of the letter that Diezani had written to some foreign universities wanting to take up lecturing position, because she told the court during her evidence that she had already told President Goodluck Jonathan that she didn't want to continue. That was if Jonathan had won the 2015 election. She had already told him, I don't want to continue, because then, remember then, she didn't know she had cancer, but she said it was too much, the stress of the job, the attack by the opposition, the then APC opposition that she had. So we saw during the witness, when she was in the witness box, that she had sent cover letter to foreign universities wanting to take up lecturing after her career as oil minister ended. So that was number one point that Jonathan Lidlow put out yesterday, to say, look, these are 9 incontestable facts to let you know that my client, this decision, he said, in fact, this must be an evidence-based decision. So he said, look, all this points to an acquitter on all cases, on all count for his client. Number 2, he said, our interest to fight corruption. So again, he pointed out, yes, though he did mention that it was dangerously a sort of a poor judgment to be very close to Kola Luku and something, but he said, look, Diezani showed she wanted to fight corruption, which letters were cited that she wrote to President Goodluck Jonathan wanting a probe of Atlantic Energy. Remember that recording of 2014, that recording that went viral that was saying, I'll escort you to jail. He said that was a crisis meeting. Apart from that, and she had explained that during cross-examination while being led in evidence, to say, look, I said that they have taken it out of context. It wasn't an admission of wrongdoing, of crime. I was saying, being the person on whom my table was where the buck stops, I was saying, all right, you're saying you have facts on me, come on, bring them on. I'll escort you to jail. She explained that when she was in the witness box and during cross-examination. So he said, look, Diezani had shown that she wanted to fight corruption. And not only that, letters she wrote to the president and letters she wrote to the to the Ministry of Petroleum that they must investigate Atlantic Energy, because Atlantic Energy, remember, they were not paying their contribution of the cash calls. That was when she fell out with Kola Luku and Gigi Omokori. And remember, so Jonathan Lidlow said, look, if this was somebody, this is evidence that this woman was fighting corruption. And this was then the figures that Gigi Omokori and Kola Luku's companies were owing was over 1 billion. That was the shortfall in their cash call contribution. That was when they fell out. That was when they had that meeting in May 2014, and that was when the things fell apart for the two of them. So it was from then she had explained also during cross-examination and in the witness box to say, look, that was when we fell out. That was when, because I couldn't say, because I was advising them, these people were not paying cash calls over 1 billion. And living, especially Kola Luku, living the jet flamboyant lifestyle, going to Grand Prix, having Beyonce doing party for him, and then buying that yacht. He said that was when the fellow, she had explained that. So our defense pointed to that yesterday to say Diezani wanted to fight corruption, not just wanting to, she instituted corruption probe. of Atlantic Energy and Gideon Mokwe. So he said, this is fact. The prosecution, they didn't challenge this fact. So that was point number two. He said also statement made by Igo Sanomi and Kevin Oyere that was said to bribe her. Both of them sent written statement, and in the judge's written direction to the jurors, written statement they count as evidence. That is just that. It's just that the person, they are not here. Also, that is number four. They also mentioned number 5 of the 9 incontrovertible facts is Jonathan's dealing with reimbursement. As I mentioned yesterday, the defense for Diezani told the court on Monday, told the court on Wednesday when it started and said, look, the Crown did not produce one single evidence to say we got somebody from NNPC or from Ministry of Transport who said there was no reimbursement system in place. So he said, you cannot then deny that all the shoppings, let's even say 8 million that Kola Loco and the Gideon Mokore deal made for Diezani, you cannot disprove that they were not reimbursed. Also, and the evidence also from former President Goodluck Jonathan, it touched on reimbursement, that there was a system in place whereby people who did something, who provided services for ministers will be reimbursed. So Jonathan Laidlaw mentioned that was number 5. Then number 7, returning school fees that was paid for Diezani's son, King's School in Canterbury, which Kevin, let me just open that payment, which was paid by Benedict Peters. He mentioned that, he said, look, this fees was returned. Immediately, the school contacted Diezani that they had traced 2 school fees payments, and they discovered that it was Kevin Gary, or I hope it's not either Kevin Gary or Benedict Peters. I'll correct that. Yes, when that payment was, he said they asked the school to return that. I said, look, if she wanted people to bribe her, they wouldn't return the school fees. Not only that, she also said during her evidence and during cross-examination that all of her stepchildren, the 5 children of Rear Admiral Ali Madueke, they did their university education abroad. So for the son they have together to come and school here for a secondary, it wasn't something which they couldn't afford. And moreover, she said during her evidence then that her son was being escorted to school. That was, remember, in 2015, between 2010 and 2015, that was when there was kidnapping, that, policemen, armed guards were escorting their son to and from school. That was the point ex-husband said, look, this boy must get out of Nigeria. So that was why they sent him and he said, look, the 5 children, all our stepchildren, they did their university abroad. So for their son to come and school here is not something which was just something which they couldn't afford. So, and then number 8, he said, ordering the investigation against Atlantic Energy, it's evident that Diezani was fighting corruption, that they couldn't be bribing her. If she wanted to be collecting bribe or to be using her closeness in advising those people on their about their interior decoration of their properties, if she wanted to use that as an excuse, she would not have had that fallout with Kola Luko and Gideon Mokore. Said she ordered investigation. Letters were tendered there by her defense to say, look, this woman, she could not close her eyes because Kola Luko and Gideon Mokore, they were owing government over $1 billion. So she ordered the investigation. She showed us the letter. They presented the letter that she wrote to Jonathan and also to the Minister of Petroleum to say, investigate Atlantic Energy and also the company owned by Gideon Mokwe. So he said, these are evidence that this woman, so you cannot say that she wanted to take bribe. So she, and also other two and like I mentioned yesterday, he also mentioned good character. This is the only woman president of OPEC that she could not, that the judge said, and she cited, he directed the jury to the written direction and agreed fact number 40. Agreed fact 40 is that the Crown prosecution does not suggest Mrs. Alice Madueke did anything improper in their word of prayer. Say, if the Crown said this, how come? What is the point of this trial again? So he's saying these are contradictions that it is even does not fit in the Crown's narrative. So he said, look, the Crown, these 9 points that he has presented, they point to acquittal on all counts for his clients. And then the bishop's case, like I said, his own lawyer said, look, in his own closing, and said, the bishop, there's not one single evidence. He said also the prosecution, they didn't even know the difference. I think it was Timber's lawyer that said that the defense, the prosecution, they didn't even have an expert witness. Somebody in the oil industry, they didn't even call any. And as I mentioned yesterday, Diezani's lawyer said, look, they did not even get one person from Ministry of Petroleum and NNPC to come and disprove. So all the three defense counsels, they really, they bashed the prosecution to say, look, there are too many gaps. Let me also point to wrap this up. The point they were using to tie Olatimbo Ayinde to this case was that in the conspiracy theory was just one unopened text. This was cited also in the evidence and the prosecution used this heavily to say, look, there was a text that Olatimbo sent to Diezani to say, look, she would like to discuss with him, with her rather. Olatimbo was referring to a meeting, a meeting she had, she was in a program in Nice in 2010 when Diezani was, and Diezani said, look, there were many people. She couldn't even remember Olatimbo Ayinde, and one evidence that the Crown produced was a photograph of somebody who looked like Timbo that they presented. And in fact, Diezani told them, look, I only came to know Olatimbo during this disclosure when they started this trial that we've never met. The Crown does not have any evidence to say of a meeting together. And also our defense, Olatimbo Ayinde's defense mentioned yesterday and said, look, everything must be in context, that Olatimbo is a successful entrepreneur with over 5 companies still running. If you said a company was set up just to be servicing shopping for Diezani, the company is still trading 6 years later. He said, look, there are too many gaps in the evidence, in the case of the prosecution. So that was how he didn't finish yesterday, but he's going to continue. They said there are too many gaps in the prosecution's case. So today he said he's going to finish his submission 1 hour. And like I said, today, the judge has said today is going to be a full day. Normally Friday should start by 9:30 and finish by 1:30, but the judge said to the jury, come at 10:15. We are going all the way to 4 o'clock. And just to wrap up for this segment, today I'm suspecting judges don't like sending jurors out on a Friday afternoon. So I reckon when Olatimbo Ayinde's judge or defense will finish his submission, the judge will then wrap up on all the 3 defendants and probably tell the jurors, go and have a nice weekend. And then on Monday, she'll probably finish her summing up. And then my suspicion is that is when she's going to send the jurors out. So that is how it is for now. And I hope I may see you later in the day. If not, definitely on Monday. But that is how I'll probably give you a snippet, of how today pans out, because today we are going all the way. It's going to be a full day, not a half day. So enjoy the rest of your day. And if I do see you later, put everything in context. That's what Timbo Ayinde's lawyer said to the Crown yesterday, that they were cherry picking what suits them. that they didn't even know that Olatimbo, there's a difference between a sterling account and a business account, a sterling personal account and a business account. And just to mention this also, her lawyer said, look, Prince Momo was treating prostate cancer. And if they check his own statement of account, that they pointed to that there was also payment from his own account for a visit to a prostate cancer clinic at Harley Street. He said, number two, I also must chip this in. He said, Diezani's ex-husband, Rear Admiral's company, and Timbo's company, they are in litigation. Timbo's company has sued Diezani's Rear Admiral's company. They are still in litigation in Nigeria. So he said, if somebody is going to bribe, it doesn't make sense, because that case should have been dropped. If Timbo wanted to bribe Diezani, would have dropped the case against her ex-husband. Of course, the case started long before, she filed for divorce. So it doesn't make sense. If you are saying she wants to bribe Diezani, and then you are in litigation with her husband's company, it just does not add up. So that's why I said there are too many gaps in the prosecution's case that they didn't take time to fill those gaps, and then they just wanted to drag people into this trial. I said they didn't even try enough. If they tried enough, probably this trial would not have even, after over 10 years, they didn't try enough. So that's it for now. I hope to see you later in the day.